Pelicans make a massive and aggressive statement by trading for Derick Queen. I'll tell you how it works out for New Orleans, but why it also might be a reckless move. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Friday, and we are going to break down the massive gamble the Pelicans made trading up for Derick Queen. I'm going to tell you why they did it, their reasoning behind it, with some quotes from Joe Dumars in there. We'll look at Derick Queen, the player, how he fits, and I do think he does fit well on this Pelicans team, and then also look at the risks, because this could be construed as a reckless move. We're going to break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And if you're an everydayer, let me know what you think about the trade down below. And don't forget, you can catch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, the same place you watch your Pelicans play every day, every weekday at 10:30 a.m. So let's get into the trade here. And look, I'm going to not pass judgment on the trade yet. It's probably riskier than personally I would have done, but I see their logic. I see their vision. I'll explain it to you, but then we're going to look at the risks too. You know, one of the things that I think is a little silly to do is draft grades right after the fact, right? We've never seen any of these players play in the NBA. You know, we can look back at draft grades for years and you're like, that didn't work out because you don't know anything yet. It's impossible to actually judge any sort of move for a little while. And that's going to be the same for the Pelicans here. A risky trade, admittedly, moving up from 23 to 13. So here's the trade. The Pelicans traded the 23rd overall pick along with their next year's first round pick. It's a swap with the Bucks. Basically what it means is they're trading next year's first round pick. They will not have a first round pick in the next draft to move up 10 spots to select Derick Queen at number 13 overall. There were a bunch of draft day trades that involved moving up. We'll look at what it took to do that too. This is kind of in line with them, but not quite, right? One thing to keep in mind with this is, you know, as much of the risk as there is, if Derick Queen works out, none of the rest of the trade matters. Giving up next year's pick, if Derick Queen works out, even if the Pelicans aren't good next year, doesn't matter. If Derick Queen becomes an all-star, this trade is fine and honestly a good move. It's as simple as that, right? You're going to judge this based on the results. And we won't have those results for a little while. If Queen works out, none of the rest of anything about this matters. So why did the Pelicans do this in what is considered a risky or reckless trade? And this was Joe Dumars identifying a player he wanted and going out and getting him. And Joe Dumars said in his post-draft media availability, you know, when you have a chance to get foundational pieces like this, you got to do what you can to go and get your guy. And that's essentially what the Pelicans did. You know, on Locked On NBA Big Board's Big Board, they had Jeremiah Fears at 4 and Derick Queen at 9. The Pelicans just got 2 top 10 players in what's considered a good draft. That's why they did this trade. This was a guy they thought fit. This is a player they really want to have on the team. So they went out and they got him. And you've long heard me say, if you're an everydayer, if there's someone you want, you're going to need to overpay a little bit. So go and get your guy. Now, the Pelicans might have paid too much. We'll break that down a little bit later. But they identified someone they wanted, think that guy can be an all-star, and then they went out and got him. It's kind of as simple as that, right? They identified who they wanted. They were going to be aggressive to remake the roster and not just be complacent and do something else that they could do, right? That's what this is about. Them identifying a player that they like, that they think is going to be really good in the NBA, that they think fits with Jeremiah Fears, fits with Zion Williamson, And they went out and made it happen. Simple as that. Whether you like the trade or not, there's something to be said for a team at least having some sort of vision, whether that vision's good or bad, and executing on it. And that's what the Pelicans tried to do here. So I get why they kind of made this move. They're viewing it as, okay, if Queen's as good as we think he is, who cares about the pick next year? This guy's worth that sort of thing. Even if that pick is top 5 next year, could be, they're going to say, well, we think Derick Queen's a top 5 player and we've had him in our building for an extra year. That's more valuable to them with that. They view themselves as building something. What that something is yet, I'm not entirely sure. And there better be a plan beyond just acquiring guys, but you can kind of see a little bit of the vision of what they're trying to do in terms of putting players out there on the court. And we'll talk about that with Derick Queen and his fit in the next segment here. But this was them just taking a risk on a guy that they really like. This puts a lot of pressure on Derick Queen. This means the Pelicans are absolutely going for it next year. Whether that's smart or not in a very tough Western Conference, I think they'll be in the mix for a play-in tournament spot. If you do that, you're looking at maybe the 14th pick in the draft. It could be better, worse. Also, even if you get the 14th pick, it could improve in the lottery, as we've saw with the Dallas Mavericks this past year. So there's tons of risk associated with it. But sitting on picks doesn't necessarily do you any good. The draft can be a crapshoot at times if guys develop or not. This is them, this is the Pelicans having a process and trusting their process, and that process just happens to be Derick Queen right now. Whether that's smart or not, whether you think the Pelicans are going to be competitive or not next year is really going to, judge how you view this trade. If you're a big Derick Queen fan, you love this deal. If you don't like Derick Queen, you hate it. If you think the Pelicans are going to be a playoff team next year, you should probably like this trade. If you think the Pelicans aren't going to be a playoff team next year, you probably hate the trade. I don't know if there's really much middle ground on it. Now, I'm just not going to grade it because I don't know yet, right? There's a chance they could be good next year. There's a chance not. I don't think they're done with their roster. I don't think they're done trying to make moves. So thus, I'd kind of give this trade an incomplete. Let's get into beyond just the risk. Let's look at the player, right? This is the guy who's going to play for the team next year. What does he bring to the team? Where does he fit? What's he need to grow? How might the Pelicans use him? And I think that's where things get interesting. Let's look at that coming up here next. Then we'll get into the risks and why this could be a reckless move for the Pelicans. All that and more in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was kind of intrigued. I've always had a tough time buying underwear. You don't want something that bunches up. I prefer something that's breathable with a little bit of stretch, but it's got to be comfy, all of that. So when I heard about the quality of Skims from family and friends, I had to give it a try. And I'm going to tell you, it lives up to the hype. I was wearing a pair at the Pelicans facility yesterday. I'm wearing a pair right now. Finding fit, comfort, style, Skims has it all. I really like the 5-inch stretch boxer brief. I want to go to the gym. I might want to go from my office to the gym. I don't want to go through a massive change. Being able to just keep these on all day long without it feeling like I'm wearing athletic shorts when I'm in an office or on a plane all day, all of that's great. So they're breathable. They don't ride up. They look good. They feel good. Absolutely love Skims underwear. So shop Skims men's at skims.com. That's SKIMS.com. Let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and then select Locked On Pelicans or Locked On NBA in the drop-down menu that follows over at skims.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And don't forget, watch us on Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And also for your second listen, Locked On NBA, the offseason. It is something here in the NBA, isn't it? For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no off season. Stay up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's get into Derick Queen, the player. Let's take a break from the stuff around him and just look at him in a vacuum by himself. Derick Queen, the player. Someone that the Pelicans clearly had very high on their board, easily in the top 5, top 6 guys, I think. And Derick Queen was a productive college player in his freshman year at Maryland. 16.5 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. This is a guy that is a very skilled and talented offensive big man and a good rebounder. 6'10" with a 7'1" wingspan. Not the most athletic guy out there, but he's got enough athleticism. He is very skilled. He plays more like a guard at times than he does a big man. This is someone who's really good at scoring inside, in the paint. He can use left or right hand to score out the glass, whether that's him driving, whether that's him playing with his back to the basket, whatever it might be. His post game is pretty advanced for a player. The Pelicans have been kind of missing that presence. They did not have that guy in Yves Missi last year. If you look at how well Jonas Valanciunas played for the team, Derick Queen has a lot of those kind of moves, whether it's drop steps. He's got a little baby hook that he has too. He can just score, and he's comfortable facing up or taking guys off the dribble. And I think that's a really important thing. There's a lot of skill to this kind of guy. A couple spin moves and everything you saw as well. So he's a guy that down low is going to be able to score. And he's a good rebounder too. The Pelicans needed to add some size. They needed to add some rebounding, particularly on the defensive glass. And Queen is definitely a guy that can use his size to be able to do that. One thing that I noticed watching his film, especially last night, is he has a very good instinct of knowing when to time his jump for a rebound. That's one of the most important skills that you can't really teach, of just knowing when to jump to go and out rebound guys, timing that jump. Kevin Love was really well known for this. Derick Queen has a lot of that in him. So you see the ability to go and be a good rebounder here. I don't think he's going to be much of a rim protector, but he's got enough athleticism to defend on the perimeter, to switch on the perimeter, and get back and try and block some shots that way too. And the fact that he's a big dude is probably an important thing with that, where that can be a rim deterrent by itself. The most impressive thing, and the most at least intriguing thing to me about him, is his playmaking, is his facilitating. This is someone that shows flashes of being an offensive hub out of the mid post here. If you look at how Domantas Sabonis and Alperen Şengün are used, you can see Derick Queen fitting into some of that mold. Şengün doesn't shoot threes, and Queen isn't a three-point shooter now, though he has potential to be one, I think. But if you run your offense through him in the mid to high post, I think that can work. And now all of a sudden, when I talked in the last segment about what the Pelicans' vision is and it kind of coming together, they're clearly looking for guys that can put pressure on defense beyond just shooting. They want guys that can drive and attack and force defenses into rotations. Three-point shooters don't force rotations by themselves. You need to have guys that can get into the teeth of a defense, beat their man off the dribble, have a help defender come over, and now the defense is rotating, and if you keep moving the ball, you can find an open shot. If you run a lineup of Jeremiah Fears, Jordan Poole, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, and Derick Queen, that's 4 guys in Fears, Poole, Zion, and Queen that are playmakers in some capacity. And one of the lessons to be learned from the postseason this year is you need those kind of guys. You need lots of guys that are playmakers. So having multiple guys that can play make, create their own shot. Look at Derick Queen with that game winner over Colorado State in the tournament, right? That was kind of all him. And pass, you're lacking some shooting, but you start to see the vision there. Shooting's important, but it's not the be-all, end-all of things either. So you start to see what the Pelicans are looking at and what they're viewing here. Another thing to keep in mind, too, is double big lineups with Derick Queen. And let's compare him to Kaman Malawach here. Yves Missi is still on the team and maybe penciled in as a starter. I'm not entirely sure just yet. It's too early to know all of that. But Malawach and Missi wouldn't work together. You can't really play those two guys together. You can play Queen and Missi together alongside Zion Williamson out there. I don't know if you could have done Zion, Malawach, and Missi, but you can do Queen, Missi, and Zion. That's definitely going to work, or at least has the potential to work, especially if, he ends up becoming a three-point shooter. The shot looks good. The mechanics look good. 76% for a big man from the free throw line is good. He did not really take many threes per game, so he's, it's theoretical at best if he is a shooter. But overall, this is the type of guy that I think will work at the NBA level and gets really intriguing. On the lack of shooting, the Houston Rockets would run Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams out there a lot, and it got him the second seed in the West. They were maybe one of the worst second seeds we've ever seen, admittedly, but it worked. And so you can get by if you have this kind of creation without tons and tons of shooting out there. So I'm intrigued by some of what New Orleans is doing, even if the fit, the overall picture is blurry still. But keep in mind, there's probably more moves still to come from this team, and that they're not done after draft night. And in fact, now with only 2 centers on the roster, really, you have Karlo Makovic there too, in Misi and Queen. I wouldn't be shocked with the 40th overall pick. And this is the Friday show, but I'm going to drop this on YouTube beforehand. So when you're listening to this, they might have already made the 40th overall pick or moved it or whatever. Wouldn't be shocked if they go with a big man in that direction as well. I think that's still what they're trying to kind of figure out here. Queen is someone they were really, really high on. Really, really high on. Now, there's a lot of ties to Troy Weaver that could be good or bad depending on how you view him. A lot of where Detroit is today was because of him. It wasn't so much as Trajan Langdon coming in like completely overhauling the roster. It was smaller tweaks he made that unlocked the roster, but the most of that roster was built by Troy Weaver with the Washington Wizards last year. Troy Weaver's son is an assistant coach on Maryland, so it's very close with Derick Queen. Queen said to us in his post-draft media availability that, the Pelicans have probably talked to him the most. This was a team that, they met with the most, that he was very excited to come here, want guys that want to be here. Same for Jeremiah Fears as well. But he is a very skilled offensive big man. Defensively, it'll still be a work in progress, certainly. But the Pelicans got better in terms of rebounding, in terms of shot creation, and post presence with the draft pick of Derick Queen. Some of the concerns about him, are very valid. His conditioning did not look great in college last season. At times he looked a little bit lackadaisical, like he didn't care. He's got a very happy-go-lucky attitude. He doesn't come off as the most intense kind of guy, from what I've been told in, pregame things. He's just kind of happy. He's having fun out there. That's neither good nor bad to me. Look, as long as you produce out there on the court, which Derick Queen has definitely done, I think is important. And I think when you look at the passing from him, this is someone who does have some selfless qualities to him. And that's important. Joe Dumars has spoken about kind of those type of qualities that they really want. They want guys that are selfless. They want guys that are going to hustle and work hard. There are some of the questions about that with Derick Queen, but given that that's what Joe Dumars is putting such a massive emphasis on, you would imagine they don't have concerns about Derick Queen when it comes to that. And they have more info on Derick Queen than we do, looking at it from the outside looking in. So there's a lot to like about Derick Queen, the player, his fit on this team too, his fit with Zion, his fit with Jeremiah Fears. In terms of just the player, I like it. Makes a ton of sense. And I think if Derick Queen hits, his skill set is so unique for a big man, especially in this draft. There's shades of DeMarcus Cousins. There's shades of Naz Reid. There's shades of Jonas Valanciunas. I love that kind of player on this roster, and we've seen Zion work with those type of players before too. What you might not love, even if you like Derick Queen, is the price the Pelicans gave up to go and acquire him. Was this a risk? Was this aggressiveness? Or was this reckless? Let's look at that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, because there's some more context to add around that, including a quote by Joe Dumars that I don't quite agree with. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. You ever decided at the last minute you want to head to a Pelicans game or a baseball game with friends and family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. So with the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer you get to first pitch or tip off, and they've also got incredible last minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. So Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easier to browse the app for exciting upcoming MLB games. I'll be at a Dodger game. I'm going to be in LA for a little bit, planning on going out there for it all. But look, if you want to go see the new young guys on the Pelicans, we're going to have the schedule soon. You'll be able to buy tickets already. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. For your second listen, Tyler Shuck signed his contract yet? Is he going to be the starter for the Saints next season? Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints is going to be breaking down everything black and gold. Make Locked On Saints your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Or watch them on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network at 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. All right, let's look at the price the Pelicans paid to move up. Was this an aggressive move? Was this a gamble? Or is this reckless? And I think it depends right now, right? There's a risk-reward calculation into this. And the way Joe Dumars described it when asked that question was, when you have the chance to make 2 lottery picks, you're basically making next year's pick early. That's what he's saying here. We're making the pick now instead of making the pick next year. And if you think the picks are going to be in the same range, like, sure, whatever, that's fine. Like, who really cares, right? Next year's draft may be a little bit better than this one, at least at the top. The middle of the draft, we don't know just yet, right? So they identified someone they want. They went and got him now. And they're like, yeah, we don't really care about next year because we feel this is going to work out in our favor. But it might not, right? This is a risky move. There's nothing to say that the Pelicans are actually going to be competitive and good next year. We've seen them before say, we're going to be good this year. And then this year you end up with a 21-win season, and a top 4 projected pick before the lottery didn't go their way. That absolutely could happen to them next season. And now all of a sudden it looks like you're giving up a top 5 pick next year just to move up 10 spots. That's something that's worth keeping in mind with this, right? This is not them trading a first next year for a new first this year. They already had the 23rd pick. This is them trading a first to move up, not to get a first round pick, right? You saw in the latter part of the draft, the Sacramento Kings traded a future first for the 26th, 27th overall pick, right? You got your guy, giving up a future first. It wasn't giving up the 23rd pick and a future first to move up. And that's what the Pelicans did here. This is moving up 10 spots, not acquiring a new pick. That's worth keeping in mind when it comes to this sort of thing. That's not particularly great. Now, I'm not worried about the Indiana pick and its involvement in all of this. I think that move is fine. But you better be certain Derick Queen's the guy. Because if you do end up with a top 5 pick, you've traded Derick Queen for a top 5 pick next year. That pick is more valuable, right? And that's not a great thing. And I think it's compounded by the fact that, look, I like Asa Newell from Georgia, who went 23rd overall. You could have not made this move and still gotten a big man that I think would have fit and is comparable enough to Derick Queen. Different type of player, certainly, but you could have still gotten that rim protecting shooting big man that you're looking for in Newell. And that's why I think Atlanta's thrilled with this. If Newell was taken 1 or 2 picks after Derick Queen, different story. But I think Newell being there 23rd makes this look a little bit worse for New Orleans. You could have still gotten a guy that's going to be good or that you think is going to be good. And look, they probably don't have Newell anywhere close to Derick Queen on their board, so this is a little bit subjective when it comes down to it as well. But I think that makes it look bad. But when you look at some of the other trades on draft night, and there were a number of moves like this, it was costing a lot just to move up. The Memphis Grizzlies traded the 16th pick to the Blazers for the 11th pick, along with a 2028 Memphis pick and Orlando pick and 2 second rounders. So to move up 5 spots, the Memphis Grizzlies gave up a future first. That's an Orlando pick in 2028 and 2 second round picks. In theory, in terms of quantity of picks, that's more than what the Pelicans gave up. But that Orlando pick seems like it's not going to be as valuable as the New Orleans pick will be, right? The Suns traded 29 and a future first for Mark Williams, right? There were a couple of moves like that. The Utah Jazz traded 3 second round picks to move up 3 spots. The Kings got the 24th pick for a 2027 first round pick. So there were a couple of moves like this that involved it was expensive just to move up in the draft. Kind of the going rate. So it makes it look a little bit better to me, but you could have still gotten your big man at 23 and had next year's pick. That I think makes this look worse, right? And if the Pelicans believe they're going to be competitive, that's great. I don't think most people think they're a lock to be a playoff team, which makes this trade risky. This is somewhat like gambling away your rent money. You might pay your rent in the future too, or you might be looking for a new place to live. It's really going to come down to how Derick Queen plays. Otherwise, this, is reckless and bad management. It's one thing to stick to your guns and have a vision and go and do it. But if your vision sucks in the first place, that's not great, right? Yeah, look, I love people who stick by their beliefs. But if their beliefs are just wrong in the first place, yelling about it and believing in them doesn't do you any good, right? And again, some of this is subjective here when it comes to how you view players. And I see some of what New Orleans is doing, but it is risky, borderlining on reckless what they did here. But it depends on where you think the Pelicans are going to fall. Where do you think they fall in a tough Western Conference? If you think they're going to be in the mix for a play-in tournament spot, it's probably fine. If you think they're just going to be bad next year, this looks really dumb on the surface of it. But we don't know for sure yet. It's going to be TBD. It's going to only, time will tell when it comes to it. That's why I call this kind of an incomplete in what they're doing with the rest of the roster. I'm intrigued by the roster. Don't know if it's good, but I'm intrigued. And we'll be breaking down the roster and more other moves here on Locked On Pelicans. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on YouTube as well and on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. We'll be back maybe this week too. We got a whole lot more to come. There's a whole lot to talk about with this team. We'll be covering it all right here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. See y'all next time.